focus today. Out of the 45 minutes that I'll be presenting today, about 30 of those minutes will be dedicated strictly to PPP forgiveness. So I promise we will be talking about PPP forgiveness today. But I'll spend about 15 minutes covering my intro and also just giving you guys where we are today in the world, basically. All right, where we've been since 2020 and where we are today. I know there's a lot of stuff out there in the media. There's a new variant, all the different things that's going on in the world. And so my job today is to go over the forgiveness, but I also want to spend a decent amount of time just talking about where we are. And so with that, let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Jeff Badu. I am a licensed certified public accountant, or CPA for short. I do have a formal education. I graduated from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in accounting. And then I'm a parallel entrepreneur and a wealth multiplier. All right. I'm the founder and CEO of Badu Enterprises LLC, which is a multinational conglomerate in the finance industry. And what we do is we provide a suite of financial services, including our marquee company, which is Badu Tax Services. And that's the firm that does tax preparation, tax planning, and tax representation for individuals and businesses across all 50 states in the US. And we also have clients in over 25 countries at the moment. And this year, by the way, we implemented our PPP services as well, stimulus package services. And so we do assist with, applications, including the forgiveness, which we'll announce later today, something for you guys. But also I have Badu Investments LLC, which is our real estate investment company. And what we do is we invest in apartment buildings, rental properties, mainly on the south side of Chicago, in efforts to restore traditionally underserved communities. Currently, we have 212 units under our control that we provide, management, that we provide stable housing to tenants, and in exchange, we do receive cash flow for that effort. And we also have the Badu Foundation. Happy Giving Tuesday, by the way. We have the Badu Foundation that provides financial literacy education to the youth ages 6 to 18, where we teach them on topics such as budgeting, saving, investing, and scholarships. And then my purpose in life is to inspire and support the super hungry to take hold of infinite resources in order to create an abundant lifestyle. And so with that, let's just talk about real quick some of the different legislatures that have passed. There's actually more than what's listed on the screen. We just had the infrastructure plan, for example, just get passed this month, right? And then next month we'll have more than likely the tax plan, that will also get passed next month as well. All right, so we did have an election, right? We did elect a new president for 2021 moving forward. And basically, now let's take it a step back, right? March 2020, we get this thing called COVID-19. Scares the world and completely shatters a lot of the stuff that we've done. But luckily, we've been able to rebuild over time, and we're consistently pushing every single day. And so due to the COVID-19 pandemic, right, due to the fact that we are in a pandemic, what Congress did was stepped in and approved a package, right? The CARES Act. And the CARES Act was basically it's multiple trillions of dollars that released money into the economy. There was some, for example, you might be familiar with yeah. All right, sorry about that. So you might be familiar with stimulus checks. You might be familiar with PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. You might be familiar with EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So the CARES Act released all these programs, right? The ERTC, Employee Retention Tax Credit, all these different programs to be able to stimulate the economy, right? So that was basically back in March of 2020. And then right around December 28th, 2020, there was the Coronavirus Relief and Omnibus Agreement, which released PPP-2, right? So we had PPP-1, that was in the CARES Act, and then we had PPP-2. And then there was supposed to be a PPP-3, But it turned out PPP 3 was just a funding, additional funding for PPP 1 and 2, which is good, which is great. But unfortunately, we were expecting there would be a third round of PPP, but unfortunately, that has not happened yet. And I do want to put a big asterisk next to the word yet because it could happen. We just had a new variant that popped up last Friday, right after Thanksgiving. All right. So, with all that being said, we could potentially be getting some new packages. We don't know what will happen. But due to us having a new president, due to us being in the pandemic, that's all going to lead to planning for next year. There's certain things that we need to plan for next year. Right? There's an infrastructure package that got passed this month, and then there's also the tax, the tax plan that's also going to get passed more than likely next month. So these are all things that we need to watch out for. And one thing that might be overlooked, and I believe this is why the Chicago MSDC team decided to host something like this, was because of the fact that, man, we're probably not thinking about forgiveness. We probably overlooked it because PPP loans didn't have any payments due. All right, so no payments due at this time, at least. And it's like, okay, PPP 1 is done, PPP 2 is done, but what about forgiveness? Let's not forget about forgiveness because there's still a good handful of people that have not applied for forgiveness. So why not host something like this? So why are we here today? Is because we don't want you to forget about PPP forgiveness if you've received the PPP loan, right? If you've received a PPP loan. And so with that being said, let's just go ahead and go through the agenda real quick. We'll briefly touch upon PPP, the program itself, why it came about. We talk about first time and second time, and then also the PPP forgiveness process. All right, we're going to talk about the PPP loan forgiveness process. We're actually going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes looking at an application. We're going to go through from start to finish, all the way from the name section to the signature section, and just go through some of the features, some things that you need to watch out for when you're applying for forgiveness. All right. Now, full disclosure, right? Badu Tax Services is basically involved in the forgiveness process. Right. We do happen to be able to submit those applications as well, and we'll make an announcement at the end, and I'll actually let Lenore make that announcement. So just keep in mind that we are here to help. Right. Anything that I'm saying today is more for education and awareness purposes. But if you actually want to go in and do the application, then that's where you might want to consult with an expert so that you can get it done the right way. I would hate for you to lose out on forgivable money. The next thing you know, it turns into a loan, right? An actual loan that you have to pay back. So the goal today is by the end of today, everybody who has a PPP loan, our goal is to help you get it forgiven. All right. And I do recommend that you act pretty fast, even though I'll explain this later, but there's no technical deadline for PPP forgiveness. All right. So with that being said, on this slide here, and apologies for some of the text being small, this is because we're just going to recap this. I'm only going to spend at max, right, at max 5 minutes on this slide. So we have the Paycheck Protection Program, and we also do have the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The reason why that's on this slide is if you haven't taken advantage of EIDL yet, I strongly encourage you to do so. Right, strongly encourage you to do so. It's a very favorable loan. You do have to pay it back, but there's also a grant, right? There's also a grant that's tied to the loan, the EIDL Advance, one where they have it now in economically distressed areas, right? So there's that $10,000 grant, and then in addition to that, they released another $5,000 grant, all right? Another $5,000 grant. And thank you to the Chicago MSDC team. I believe that's Lenore typing in the chat, just giving us real-time updates. Looks like there will be another webinar next Tuesday as it relates to EIDL. All right, so with that being said, our focus today is PPP. All right, so from this time all the way to the end of the presentation today, it's strictly PPP. I'll speak until about 3:45 p.m. Central, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A if you have any questions at 3:45 p.m. Central, right? And so you can type in your questions in advance in the chat, or you can go ahead and, you can put them in there at the end. So I'll answer any questions at the end, so at 3:45 p.m. Central. And so with that, let's talk about PPP 1 and PPP 2. All right, so remember, the CARES Act was what activated the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, one of the hottest programs I've ever heard of in my life. When it came out, it was hot. It was very, very hot. It's buzzy. It's a very, very hot thing that was out. Unfortunately, funds have run out of the PPP program, but there's talks, there's discussions, there's stuff that's happened behind closed doors saying that PPP may come back for those who qualified but didn't actually receive money. Now, something really, really bad happened earlier this year. Something terrible happened, and to no fault of anybody, right? At least not nobody has admitted fault yet. But the funds ran out before everybody expected it to. Right, funds ran out around Q2 of this year, between April through June. Right, funds ran out, and nobody could submit applications anymore. It was very detrimental, very, very detrimental. So what the PPP program did was, we have PPP 1, which basically allows you to get up to a $2 million loan, forgivable loan. And the way to calculate this is, you essentially take, if you're a Schedule C business, and this was huge. At first, it was your net profit, right? Your net profit on your Schedule C of your tax return. Your net profit, Schedule C of the tax return. And you take that number and you divide it by 12 and multiply it by 2.5, and that would get you your loan amount. All right, but then something massive, massive happened. They said, hey, forget net profit, because we know a lot of businesses in the United States of America who claim a lot of tax write-offs, and maybe they're going through some tough times, right? So how about we allow you to use gross income or gross profit, right? Gross, that's before expenses. So now, instead of the net profit, we take gross divided by 12 and multiplied by 2.5. And then if you're in the food or accommodations business, you do it times 3.5. Now, the maximum loan amount you can get as a self-employed Schedule C is $20,833. Right. So once they released the new rules, guess what happened? The people who had already received money under the old rules got screwed over. Unfortunately, they couldn't go back and reapply, right, using the higher gross revenue amount as opposed to net revenue amount or net profit. So this is why they're thinking about releasing more money, because there's some people that got screwed over when it comes to the PPP 1 and PPP 2 program. And oh, by the way, they did this for both PPP 1 and PPP 2, right? So basically, if you're Schedule C, or someone who's a sole proprietor, or you have an LLC taxed as a sole proprietorship, then all you had to do was take your gross profit amount divided by 12 and then multiplied by 2.5. That would be your loan amount, maximum of $20,833. If you're an S corporation, this is where S corps learn the hard way why it's important to be running W-2 payroll for yourself as the owner, even if you don't have W-2 employees. If you do have W-2 employees, they do get calculated. They get factored into the calculation. All right, so you would take your payroll amount over the past 12 months, or 2019 or 2020, whichever is the higher. You take that number divided by 12, and then you multiply it by 2.5, and that gets you your PPP loan amount. As an S corporation, you are by law required to run W-2 payroll if you have a net profit. This is called reasonable compensation. If you don't, there's a 100% penalty on the payroll taxes, the FICA or self-employment taxes, and other taxes that you would have paid had you ran the correct amount of payroll. So S corporation owners learn very, very quickly that you must be running W-2 payroll. For the 1065 partnerships, so if you're filing your tax return as a partnership, unfortunately, you learn the hard way that you have to use your net profit as opposed to your gross profit. It was like, wait a second, why are you letting the Schedule C folks use gross profit, but why are you not letting the partnership? I don't know the answer to that question. But if you're a partnership, then you use your net profit on your 1065 partnership return, right? Divided by 12, and then you multiply it by 2.5. Right now, there's also a rule that if the partners, the individual partners, in a way wanted to apply on their own, there's a special rule in there that says that hey, the partners themselves, since they're technically self-employed by the partnership, they can go ahead and apply on their own, basically, right, using certain stipulations, certain exemptions, and be able to get their own PPP loan. Right. I mean, if you're running a partnership and you're making a net profit anyway, then you might as well have applied on your own. Pretty much everybody was eligible for this program, but for PPP2, they did come up with some restrictions. Your gross profit or gross receipts, money that you're receiving, revenue, in any quarter 2020 compared to 2019 had to have gone down by 25% or more. All right, so your gross receipts, your gross revenue had to have gone down by 25% or more in any one quarter compared to the same quarter from 2020 and 2019. Also, you cannot have more than 300 employees to get PPP2, and you must have used or intend to use all your PPP1 funds before you use the PPP2. I mean, that one was pretty much a given, right? And then in order to qualify for forgiveness, 60% of the amount, at least 60% of the amount you receive had to go to payroll. You know, if you're self-employed, well, it's 100% forgiven automatically in a way. You just have to apply for it. And then the other 40% can now go towards essentially rent, utilities, mortgage interest, and then they added some additional operational expenditures, property damage costs, supplier costs, worker protection expenditures. This is how beautiful the PPP program was. Not only do you not have to pay it back, but you don't even include the amount you receive, even if it's forgiven in your taxable income for tax purposes. And the expenses you use the money for, you can deduct those expenses on your tax return. I mean, to be honest, this is the best program that I've seen as it relates to small business funding loan programs, in my opinion. All right, so basically, that's the PPP overview. Right, we've done webinars, we've done a lot of stuff on that. So won't get too deep into it. So the next 15 to 20 minutes, I want to spend some time actually talking about forgiveness, looking at a forgiveness application. All right, so basically, in order to apply for forgiveness, you do have the option to apply directly through your lender, or Lenore will announce this later today. We have something for you guys today with my firm, Badu Tax Services. All right. And so with that being said, it would be great to really, really pay attention to some of the things that's on the application and then stay the whole time, right, to make sure you hear what the special is, because we would hate for you to miss out. And then if you have any questions, I'll leave my contact information on the next slide, essentially, so that you'll be able to take advantage of any questions. All right, so let's just go through a forgiveness application real quick. All right, looks like I'm sharing my screen here. Get this stuff top here. Okay. All right, so this is the PPP forgiveness application. And basically, it's been revised quite a few times, right? July 30th, 2021 is the application. This is the most revised date. Now remember, there's technically not a deadline on PPP forgiveness, technically. And the reason why I say it's technically, it's because the way that they wrote the rules, I think somebody might have not paid attention and forgot to say, hey, this is the actual due date. Some people would say, hey, apply 6 months after you receive the money. Apply 18 months. Apply 24 months. Well, guess what? There's no true deadline. My advice, apply for it as soon as possible. Like, just get it over with. It's fairly straightforward. We can handle it for you, no problem. So this is the actual application. You can get it on the SBA website. Remember, if you're applying, if you got your loan through a lender, you can actually apply for forgiveness directly through your lender. But today, I'm more than happy to tell you guys that we can take care of this for you, and we'll announce what that means at the end of this presentation today. So it's very straightforward. And to be honest, some of the stuff may be pre-filled looking at your application, your original application form. You will need your original application to apply for forgiveness, by the way. Always, as a business owner, always keep good books and records. Always keep files. Keep a folder that has all your important documents, articles of organization, tax ID number, right? Applications, bylaws, board meetings, minutes, everything. You want to document it all when it comes to a business. All right, so basically, first thing we put in here, we're going to put the legal name of the business. All right, so let's just do, we'll call it a sample company. All right, and then if you have a DBA, you're doing business as, then you want to go ahead and put it in there. One thing to note is that we'll basically, this is only applicable to those that got a loan of $150,000 or less. So this is a simplified S, right? This is a 3508S form. S stands for simplified. All right. So if you receive more than 150, your application may look a little more complicated and there's more documentation required. Now here's the secret. If you're using the S form, there's technically no proof, no documentation required. Now, I'm not asking anybody to try to get away with anything, but understand that there's no documentation technically that will be required when you submit. However, they will, right? They may ask you for it if they find any discrepancies in the application. They might ask you. So for payroll records, bank statements. If you're doing PPP2, by the way, you do have to prove that your gross receipts went down by 25% or more. So that they will ask for proof. This can be in a QuickBooks statement, and we do have that QuickBooks webinar coming up pretty soon. It can be bank statements, it can be a summary of revenue, right? Whatever it is you track, and usually we use QuickBooks to track this stuff, by the way. So if you have a DBA, then you'll put this in here. That's doing business as, and then you put your address. So 123 Main Street, and then we'll do the Chicago, Illinois, 60613. And then you want to put your NAICS code, your industry code. Let's do 99999 for that. And then you want to put your tax ID number, right? So you want to put your business tax ID, which is your EIN number from the IRS. And then you want to put your phone number. So we can do 773. All right, let's do one. 588-2300. Do this 230, and I will do 000. Make sure I got enough digits. All right, so we got that primary contact. You can put sample person. I mean, we're just doing an example here. And then you want to put the email address. All right. So fairly straightforward. You want to check which loan that you're applying for forgiveness. So is it first draw or second draw? We choose the first draw. And then you have an SBA PPP loan number. So let's just put one in here for now. And then you'll have the loan amount. Let's say you received $20,833 because you're Schedule C. All right. And then is there a loan increase? Most people didn't get a loan increase. So let's just go ahead and put that. And then your lender's PPP loan number. So one thing important to note, there's a SBA loan number for SBA identification purposes. And then there's a lender PPP loan number, which might be different, you know, from the, or should be different actually from the PPP loan number. And then the disbursement date, this is important because you have to designate what your coverage period would be, which is what date do you want them to use as the dates that you spent the money by. All right, so let's say you got this right when it opened or, you know, on or around. So let's do February 1st. Let's see here. Employees, you want to put your employees at the time of the application. Let's say one, because you're self-employed. And then employees at the time of forgiveness, we'll put 1 because you're self-employed. All right. And then coverage period. So coverage period is anywhere between 8 to 24 weeks. So that's the period where you spent the money. So let's just do February 1st, and then we'll do it until, we'll do 8 weeks because this money, we blew through this money pretty quick. So let's do April 1st. And then how much you spent on payroll costs. If you're Schedule C, sole proprietor, you want to do the full amount, right? You're going to want to put the full amount. And then, of course, along with that, you want to put that as the forgiveness amount. I mean, why would you not want to get the entire amount forgiven? All right, so remember, 60% of this amount needs to, or 60%, sorry, of this amount needs to be in this column here. If at least 60% is not, then you'll only be eligible for partial forgiveness, right? Partial forgiveness. As a self-employed, sole proprietor, LLC taxes and sole proprietor use a Schedule C, your number, your PPP loan amount should go here automatically. It's just how the rules work. So the self-employed one this time, they don't have to do any fancy things, right? They might ask you for bank statements and all that, but hey, you know, just keep in mind they intended for you to have this money so that you can actually use it for business purposes. This is not the time to be going out buying a Tesla, for example, right? This is not the time to be going out and, you know, lavishly spending on Gucci bags, Louis bags, and all that. This is not what this money was intended for. It's for you to keep your people hired and to cover the bills, right? Utilities, you know, any damages, anything like, you know, rent, anything that you need to spend the money on. But they do, ironically though, for self-employed, they want you to spend at least 60% on yourself, whatever you intend that to be. Right. So you can literally transfer this entire $20,833 into your personal bank account. Once it's coming to your business account, you can literally transfer it to your personal account and you would be eligible for forgiveness. Right. That's how sweet they made it for the self-employed. Now, if you're an S corporation or even a partnership and you hire people, you must have had to pay the people at least 60% of the money, which includes yourself as the employee. Right, so the other 40% then can be used for other things like utilities, home office, right, damaged goods, right, anything like that. So this application, right, it's fairly straightforward, and then you want to go ahead and initial. So we're going to initial under the name that we created, sample person. So we put SP. So you're just going to agree to the disclosures, right, and all the representations that you're making, that you're not lying on your application. There can be a fine up to $250,000, right? You know, so depending on the severity, it could cause some consequences. You want to go ahead and sign, and then you want to date it. So you want to choose today's date, and then you would submit it to your lender, and your lender would need to wait a little bit, right? They'll probably get back to you within 4 to 8 weeks or so. Now's a great time to be submitting them because they're not getting a lot of applications right now. Right, so we're gonna print our name, and then we're gonna put our title. We're gonna put owner, right, something like that, and that's the application. Believe it or not, if you're $150,000 or less, this is your application. It's fairly straightforward, nothing too complicated. You know, if you want to go ahead and fill out the survey, right, you could, the demographic survey. This helps them with some data, right? So you could very well do that, but that's optional. You don't necessarily have to do that. And then if you want to read through some of the instructions, then you can go ahead and do that as well. I mean, this is good for knowledge purposes. So if you have very, very specific questions, hey, I hired this person, they left this date, I didn't rehire, you know, what happens then, and this and that. So they give you a full-blown FAQ within the document itself because they know some people may have questions. But the reason why we're coming to a webinar like this is because you may have some questions yourself. So with that, let me go ahead and stop sharing that. Hopefully everybody was able to follow through that. And here's my contact information. You can feel free to email me, call me. I do recommend you take a screenshot of this page, or if you want to wait until you get the slides, which will Lenore will be sending after this presentation. That'll be great too. So you can always email me. Right, we help out with everything. Right, we help out with forgiveness. We help out with tax services. If you need tax services, we can help you with that. Financial services, all that good stuff. Email address is jb@badutaxservices.com. Once again, that's jb@badu, B-A-D-U, taxservices.com. Our phone number is 773-819-5675. Once again, that's 773-819-5675. Excuse me. And then our website is badutaxservices.com, or you can check out the Infinite Resources website at jeffbadu.com. And then social media is at jbadu32 or Jeff Badu on Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on and so forth. So with that, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat. We're going to open it up for some Q&A. And so I do want to invite the team back and to go over the slide, and then also to talk about our giveaway for today.
Yes, well, Jeff, you provided so much great information, but what really impressed me was the ease of getting this application filled out. I myself had never laid eyes on it. So the fact that you were able to go step by step and see just how easy it is to submit, and how, though you want to be honest, they're not asking for as much as, I think they ask you more when you're filling out your taxes than applying for this grant. So that was very instrumental in seeing firsthand what is required, and you did this in a span of about 5 to 10 minutes. Absolutely. So there's no excuse for people to at least try. You're not gonna, these funds are not gonna knock on your door because you need them. You have to go after them. You have to work these programs, and once you get your foot in the door, you open them up for future opportunities. Jeff, I don't know how important, but one thing I learned when I was working with the state over and over was the fact that many of these smaller businesses did not have an existing lending relationship with another lending institution. At some point, kind of hindered their opportunity or their chances of getting this loan. Can you speak a little bit to that, and how important it is to approach a lending institution when you don't need the money? How important it is for you to start before you come to that desperate moment where you're needing to have funds to move forward with your business?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Irma. So a wise man told me once that it's better to have money when you don't need it as opposed to not have money when you do need it. So with that being said, it is very vital to establish a relationship early. I mean, probably right when you get started, establish a relationship, probably with a local bank, someone who's within maybe like a 1 mile radius, or half mile, 1 mile, however far or close a bank is to you, and just walk in a branch one day and just say, hey, I just started my business. I'm looking for a relationship with a bank, and just want to speak with somebody so that we can build that relationship. It's vital. It's extremely important, because sometimes there's certain programs that may become available that you'll never find out unless you have a relationship with that lender. Right. So some of these programs, loans, lines of credit, very, very important to have a relationship with an existing lender if you're looking for a line of credit. So it is very, very vital, because at a minimum, you become aware of programs like this when you are working with somebody, and so, to your point, Irma, this is very, very important to have this type of relationship established before these programs even come up.
You also touched on an important factor of working with somebody in your community, because oftentimes there are not only governmental funded assistance, but there's also corporate. So if there's a large corporation doing business in your community, chances are that they're doing a good faith effort, or there's some type of mandate for them to provide assistance and economic growth to the community where they're making a lot of money in. So there's many things that you have to be aware and involved in, so that you're the first to know, because oftentimes our business owners are finding through word of mouth. Sometimes it's too late, sometimes it's too close to the deadline, and now you're you're scrambling to get the appropriate documentation and preparation for these important resources. Now, going back to the exciting announcement that Jeff and
Excuse me,
Lenora
Irma, I'm
announced.
sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry. We have a couple of questions in the chat that we need to address.
Yes, please present them to Jeff. Thank you, Lenora.
You're welcome. So, Jeff, one, thank you so much for a great presentation as always. So, first question is, can you still apply for forgiveness if your loan is in repayment?
To be honest, I don't know anybody whose loan is currently in repayment. And that's across like every single client, everybody I've talked to. But if you are in that scenario where you somehow, some way are in repayment, then yes, you can still apply for forgiveness.
Okay, so here's a second part to that question. We are presently in repayment status for the first loan. The lender is telling us that we were not eligible for forgiveness because we paid 1099s for independent contractors rather than 1040s. Do you want me to repeat that?
I believe it should say rather than W-2s. Is that where we're at? So I think we probably need a bit more details on that question, because I believe what might have happened is that the person who asked the question might have thought, or the business might have thought, that with the PPP, you can use it to pay 1099 contractors. And let's say you're a corporation, right? You're a C Corp, you're an S Corp. And so the way that the rules are stated is that if you're using it for payroll purposes, then it has to be for W-2 employees. This is something that I know a lot of people were caught upon, right? It wasn't as clear cut, especially nowadays. You know, most people are gig, right? They're in the gig economy. And so they're not your traditional W-2 employee, right? They're now turned into 1099 contractors. So unfortunately with PPP, if you're not self-employed, if you're not if you're not a Schedule C, if you don't file taxes using the Schedule C, then it has to be based off 60% essentially of payroll. Right, 60% had to be used for payroll, W-2 payroll, not 1099. And then the other 40% had to be used for things like rent, utilities, mortgage interest, cover supplier costs, right, cover damaged goods, things of that nature. So I think it was probably a situation where the lender might have asked, like, hey, they probably dug a little deeper. Like, these people that you paid, are they W-2 or are they 1099 contractors? And the moment you say they're 1099 contractors, well, now that deems you ineligible for PPP forgiveness. But even in the worst case scenario, this is a 1% interest rate loan, right? 1% interest rate loan, very, very favorable terms. So it's not the end of the world. It is a very unfortunate scenario, but it is not the end of the world. I would say, you know, maybe it's time to reach out. You know, if you want to reach out to me directly, maybe I can take a look at your case and see if we have a fighting chance. But if not, even if not, right, it's still not the worst loan on the planet to have. It's a really, really, really good loan to have, even if you have to pay it back.
So I think you answered this, but if I use 1099 employees, do they count in my payroll cost?
Yeah, so I think the SBA, to be honest, might have shot themselves in the foot a bit when they use the term employees. And the reason why is because the definition of an employee now has expanded, right? It's not like back in the day where everybody was a W-2. Nowadays, there's some people that are 1099, right? And what some people are calling those people is still employees because they are working for the company. They're working on behalf of the company. Unfortunately, according to SBA definition, a 1099 contractor is not an employee. And I even had to learn this later in the process, right? So this is coming from a CPA, an accountant, and that it was a bit skewed, especially when this thing first came out, the EIDL, for example, asking, hey, how many employees do you have, right? And, you know, traditionally you would think, okay, the world has expanded. You have companies like Uber, you got the gig economy. And so 1099s may count as may count as employees. So all in all, to say, 1099s are not employees. They are not W-2 employees. They are contract labor. They should not be counted as employees. So unfortunately, especially for PPP loan purposes, you cannot pay a 1099 contractor using PPP funds unless, of course, you're a sole proprietor, a Schedule C, who basically can use the money for pretty much anything they want.
Oh, okay. Good info. Next question. What if your workforce was reduced?
Yeah, great question. First of all, we need to make sure that that workforce was actually replenished, right? So if you lost 3, then by the time you were spending the money, by the time you're applying for forgiveness, I would hope that you would have replaced the 3. That's the reason why the PPP program came about, by the way. It's called Paycheck Protection Program. It's to protect paychecks. And so their goal here is when you lose somebody, rehire them, right? Because the thing is, the money is supposed to be used for payroll anyway. Now, it really sucks that it's only for 2.5 months, because clearly this pandemic didn't last just 2.5 months. It's gone on since March of 2020, right? And it was actually before then. They just announced it really March of 2020. So overall, that's why you want to be very strategic with your coverage period, because as long as by the end of your coverage period you had replaced those employees, then you should be good, right? But if you didn't, then you may not be eligible for full forgiveness, basically.
And can you define what a Schedule C is?
Great question. So Schedule C is the tax schedule, the tax form that's attached to a 1040 individual income tax return that you use to report your business income and your business expenses. So this is for someone who's a sole proprietor. Maybe you run a hair salon. You're basically not an LLC or corporation. So you would use a Schedule C when you file your income tax return, and you should be filing this once a year, right? And it's due by April 15th each and every year, right? So with that, if you're an LLC, if you set up an LLC and you elected to be taxed as a sole proprietorship and not a partnership, S corp or a C corp, then you're going to use a Schedule C. All right, so the Schedule C is just a form, a schedule that you use to report your business income and expenses for tax purposes, and everybody on this call today should be filing their taxes each and every year.
And what version of the form were you using?
Yeah, the version of the form, this is the 3508S, S for simple.
Okay, so that's all I have, and I think Irma has an announcement. Irma, you're on mute.
Thank you. If only my family could do that to me. But when we're talking the difference between the 1099 and the W-2, would the way that we're paying taxes have a lot to do as to how that makes one eligible against the other? Because I know I'm a 1099. It's up to me to pay my taxes. I'm responsible, as opposed to my company paying my share.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's I would say, there's benefits to both sides. Me personally, I usually recommend you go the 1099 route, because then you have a lot more leverage as to what you can do. As a 1099, now that exposes you to write-offs, right? That allows you to claim deductions, right? Meals, certain clothing, laptops, books, education, as opposed to someone who's a W-2 who meets the, basically they call this the IRS 7 pay test, where you're under the control, quote unquote, control of somebody. You're working in the office, basically your pay structure is like recurring. So there's a lot of different things that they look at when it comes to that definition. But you're right, Irma, a W-2 is someone who is working for a company, right? They're earning wages. Taxes are being taken out by the government every paycheck, versus a 1099, where you basically get to control everything. You get to control when you pay the taxes, if you pay the taxes, right? Hopefully you are, if you're legally responsible for it. But there's ways to legally reduce your taxes especially as a 1099 independent contractor.
Thank
I have
you.
another question. I'm sorry, Irma, to interrupt. I applied through my bank and I didn't know that I wouldn't have access to my initial application. I don't know how many employees I put down initially. How do I find that out?
That's a tough question. That is a tough question. I mean, I guess you can request access. I mean, they've got to have the application somewhere, right? So you would call the bank, or you would request, you would make a request from someone at the bank to get it. They have to have the application somewhere, right? Because if anything, you can tell them, hey, I need to keep this on file. So if they don't have it, then I would reach out to the SBA and see if they have it.
This is also a great reminder to always keep copies of anything and everything you submit, whether it be an application for a loan. I work in certification. You get the option to keep your own copy. This is a great example of why it's so important to keep these records.
Absolutely.
So
true.
another quick question. I meet the payroll requirement of 60% in the first 8 weeks. However, I didn't use the other 40% until months later. So do I use the 6 months or the 8 weeks?
Yeah, you would use the 6 months. You would use the 6 months, because if you did not use the other 40% in the 8 weeks, then you're not eligible for forgiveness, right? So you would just use the 6-month period essentially.
Okay. Now I'm sorry, Irma, go ahead. You had an announcement.
That's okay. And we keep dangling this carrot. So the great announcement, I'm so excited and hopeful for you all to take advantage, is that everyone that attended this webinar today is eligible to take advantage of a 1 hour. Is that correct, Jeff? A 1 hour consulting service?
Actually, Jeff will submit their forgiveness application for them.
Even better,
Mm-hmm.
because he's going to take all of 5 minutes to submit something that you've been waiting probably years to submit. I cannot stress
and he's submitting all of that free of charge.
Look at that, free of charge to you, okay? Because this is part of our program and we're trying to make it as valuable and impactful for you. And if holding your hand and getting you to put this application through is what we need, that's what we're willing to do. So everyone, I see the participants here. Jeff will be working with you. Reach out to him to make an appointment. Try to get as many of the documents that you saw that may help you support your application. Get them together. Be as prepared as possible to make full use of your time with Jeff. We want you to take advantage of as many of these resources available. And going forward, we'll be providing more subject matter experts presentations such as today's through the life of the program. It ends in June, and we hope there's a chance of it get renewed. But for the time being, take advantage of our hard work in gathering these resources and information to our vendors in our hopes to keep your business alive through this pandemic. Another thing we'd like to make you aware of is this upcoming EIDL webinar that's coming up. I attended one this morning with the Department of Commerce, and they announced that I believe the deadline for this is December 31st. So if you don't know about this and you haven't taken advantage of it, run, don't walk, and learn more about these programs. You know, unfortunately, the pandemic doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and hopefully the assistance will continue to come through for businesses being affected by the pandemic, but don't rely on any future resources. Take advantage of what's there now. And like Jeff said, some things run out before they think they will. So be the first through the door. Do your homework, create those necessary relationships, whether they be with lending institutions or economic development organizations such as your SBDCs and your PTACs, your local chambers of commerce. Is there anything else that I'm missing, Lenora?
No, I think you covered everything.
All right. Again, I'm going to repeat. Jeff, our subject matter expert on PPP, is going to submit and help you complete this application. There is no excuse for me not to see your application in the system. Please do not take this lightly. This is something I have not seen any other webinar or organization offer. So keep coming back to us. stay in connection with Lenora, myself, and most importantly today with Jeff. We also asked that if you could scan this intake QR so that we could keep you in our database for upcoming opportunities, webinars, events. I'm also working on an event, an in-person networking event for December 15th. We will be targeting mid-sized companies such as Jeff's to come out and speak with decision makers, key decision makers in the procurement, government procurement arena, as well as primes such as large construction and health providing organizations. So keep your eyes and ears open for everything that we do. We are working extremely hard to bring as much as we can to our MBEs, minority business owners in the state of Illinois. Jeff, do you have any parting words?
I think we have a question in the chat, but I would say, please take advantage of this, right? So this is definitely not offered to everyone, right? You're part of a very, very special group of folks today, and that you have an opportunity to take advantage of literally, right, free services, free of charge, submitting your PPP application, which can be the difference between you paying back a $20,000 loan or just having it forgiven completely. So, as simple as it may seem, it is so critical that if you don't do it, and if you don't do it the right way, it will hurt you quite tremendously. So I definitely want to thank everyone for joining today. And let me just go ahead and leave my contact information on the slide too. You can feel free to reach out at any time, ask questions, right? Email me, call me, whatever it takes. Let's get this done and let's get this ready. And I think, Lenora, we have one more question in the chat if you don't mind reading through.
Sure. Real quick, just to let everyone know, a copy of the presentation along with Jeff's contact information will be emailed out to everyone on tomorrow. And the final question is, if the SBA asks for documents, will they ask for my QuickBooks information or bank statements or both?
I would say probably both, to be honest, to be safe. Probably both, because bank statements are good, but QuickBooks is better because QuickBooks has an audit trail, has a paper trail, transaction codes, everything nice and organized, hopefully in one place. So they're probably going to want to see your QuickBooks more than your bank statements, but I wouldn't be surprised if they ask for both.
And Jeff will be back in 2022 to give us a QuickBooks class.
Amen to that. Absolutely.
So look out for that information as well.
Yes, and just an added a bit of advice, all this information that Jeff is going to be needing for your PPP forgiveness, start making it a practice of keeping great document files, because these will come into play when, accessing other capital opportunities, going into contracting, whether it be with the government or a corporation. They're all going to be asking for you to submit some type of documentation to support that you're an established and capable business.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Irma, and thank you, Jeff, for another great presentation. It's a great afternoon. Just a quick reminder, we are having an EIDL webinar next Tuesday at 11 o'clock a.m. We will send you the registration link with everything in the email tomorrow. Jeff will be back in January to talk about what you need to know before you file your taxes, and we'll send you a registration link for that as well. So we wish everyone a very safe and happy evening. See you guys next Tuesday on that EIDL webinar. Thanks again, Jeff and Irma, and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you, Lenora. Thank you, Jeff.
Guys. Thank you, Irma. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Lenora.